so the credit card business. And we will talk about how we help their IT organization to transform. Okay, so we talk about story today, right? So let's go back to the story mode, and let's talk about what happened 6 months before. It's actually in the, we would say it's a crisis mode. 6 months before, and there's just a big reorg happened. Basically, a lot of merge of company department and a change of bank directions. Basically, as you may know, that in China, all the banks before they earn their money, they profit from the big organizations. But now the economy changes, so people begin to try to earn their profit from normal consumers, all the banks. So this is a big change. And so a lot of merge acquisitions inside that banks, and the original CTO for the credit card company resigned. So we kind of work with a new CTO to just go through this 6 months process. And the size of team, I didn't mention that it's about 500 people for the IT team only. And it's very siloed organization. I will show the org chart later, but it's very, very siloed. And the average lead time is about 100 days. This average lead time. And normally in Kanban, we use 80% percentile. We didn't dare to use that data because it's just even worse. So they don't like us to use that matrix. We persuade them very hard on using the 80%, 85% percentile on why it's reasonable, and you got predictions or whatever, but they don't like that. Just don't use that. It's just too intimidating. And the collocate is okay. We are still using that credit card, but the cost, we will see that the testing cost is pretty high. So that's kind of where we started. And here's more like the original org chart. We have the for the credit card company is this is my first time working with the credit card company. It's kind of like an internet company, so they don't have a lot of branches. They just print the card and get the card to other people, and then make the profit. So it's a very good business model. And actually, the business team is around 500 for the core business part. So it's not a huge business team as well. And normally this is a case that we got disinteresting people. They call them BAs or business analysts. This is more like the legacy of when you have business people managing the IT guys, and they hate the IT guys, right? And they say, we don't know how to talk with those guys, and they talk strange languages we don't understand. So let's hire somebody who from IT before to manage those IT guys. So this is what the BA is actually. They kind of turn the user requirement into more like the requirement that software people understand. But actually, most of the time, they just pass around things, right? So that's what normally happens. And they kind of manage the quality and the delivery speed. They kind of manage the IT folks from representing the business guys. So that's what's happening. And in IT side, we have a kind of two island, which is more like one channel side development, which is doing the web development, the mobile development. It's kind of inner source for another company. Before that, it's kind of another company called PN Technology that we work a lot before, is trying to build the web and the apps for those companies. And the core part, which is the kernel part, is still the mainframe, IBM mainframe, V+, the credit card application, and is kind of in another island for the IT people. The bank IT people is working on that. And we have another strange team called UAT team. This is also a very interesting phenomenon, very common. It's something like, for the IT people, they want somebody test together with them. So when things falls, right? So when there's a bug happen, and they can point a finger and say that, oh, you test with me, right? So there is a bug here. So it's not only my fault, you haven't found that. And it's kind of strange ways people work together in banks, at least in China. I'm not sure what is happening here. And then some strange things happen, and these people is not really the business people. They are just the testers hired by the business people to test for them. So they are kind of guys, I didn't write the requirement, and I didn't develop software, but I'm testing for those people who write the requirement, so I don't really understand the requirement. So they ask for these testers for test cases. They are just kind of, mouse clickers in a way, right? So, but that's the whole process they have to follow. So this is kind of the situation where we started. So I tried to squeeze out 6 months process into some practices that we can use. So here we are. I tried to summarize the most important things we think to transform our IT organization, a bank IT organization. So here's a major 8 things we are doing, mostly. So I will talk through them one by one. So the first thing here is, interesting is that we was more like empower the CTO. As you can see that in a traditional bank organization, the IT people is really more like the lower class in a way, right? So they have to be managed by some IT people or some business people. So one thing we do is really, when we get insight and try to understand situation, begin to propose that we should concentrate more power for the CTOs. So basically, it's more like a partner for the CEO. So basically, you have just to blindly trust that guy, the CTO, because he knows the IT and he knows the delivery, and you have to trust him to make the decisions on which is a higher, understand the business priority and understanding the difficulty and understanding, how this works and make the call. Basically, that's something we kind of tell the CEO, even if you don't like that guy, but you have to trust him. That's the only way you can go forward to be more like a fintech company. Basically, that's a finance and technology, right? And you hold the finance part, and you have to have a guy hold the technology part. If you're not Zuckerberg or anybody who knows business and IT, and you have to trust that IT guy and just pick the right one. But the good thing about the old CTO goes, right? So this is a new guy. So it's ratherly, easier for people to trust, a new guy instead of a guy I hate for several years. So and now I tell them and say, you know what? Trust this guy. They probably, I don't mind. But a new guy, maybe, well, let's try. Yeah. So we kind of first persuade CTO basically along with the merge acquisitions, and so basically we bring the inner source channel people into the banks. So basically now we are the family, right? So everybody was working for the same CTO, all the channel side and the kernel side. So that's the first good step. And it's interesting that when we bring these people together, although they are they kind of integrate the software for years, right? So I build the app and you build the kernel, and we together, but they never met. So basically, we bring people together and say, let's have a meeting and say, oh, you are Adam. Oh, nice to meet you. We changed thousands of emails, but we never met each other. I said, and we are astonished. Like, what? You guys work for years, and some of them even live in the same buildings, but they never met. They use emails. So the good thing is that we began to put everybody, the IT people, in the same roof under the CTO. So that's the first good step. And after several months, and this case is actually a joint effort between us, Agilent, and McKinsey. So it's kind of we are more like doing the IT part of the first, and McKinsey was doing the business part. So we worked with McKinsey, and And we give the CTO further more powers in the second step, probably in the 2 months later. We kind of persuade them, and we bring the old BA people and the UAT people under the same roof with CTO. So basically, the CTO now has a whole responsibility for delivering the right requirement with the right quality and quickly. So kind of single man show. And this guy has a very good internet background. So he's very pretty capable guy. But this the second stage of the empowerment that gives him more control over everything. So that's more like the organization. The first step is more like along the line we give him more power. So that's the first step. Okay, and the second one, we have, as you can see in the paragraph before that, we have a lot of silos, right? So we have BA island, we have SA island, we have Dev island, Test island, UAT island. So basically, for any requirement to achieve, you have to travel through all this island and make sure everybody understand. So what we do, and we began to use more like a Spotify model to begin to break the silos and organize the whole organization into more like a tribes. So it's a good term, people like that. People like to use some new terms to show we are different, and that's more like the most efficient way. We are agile now, we are tribe now. Just rename that. So people like that. So one important thing we do is that we kind of join a lot of teams together. So we split into 8 tribes for the credit card company. So basically, that's more like aligning the whole business cycles for the credit card. So the first one is marketing. Basically, that's more like the campaigns, ad, and about this credit card so that you want to apply. So that's more like the pre-sales part for the credit card. And the application tribe was more like the application process. When you see, oh, this is a great card, I want to apply for that. You fill in a lot of forms, and we do a bunch of credit checking, whether we should give you the card. So that's more like the application tribe do. And the card tribe is really the card product tribe. So basically, they build different kind of product. This is more like a special card for a football club and special card for a department store, a Macy's card, something like that. So basically, this tribe build the new card product for the organization. And we have the installment tribe. So that's where really they're making money, right? So normal people, if you just charge your credit card, they make 10 apiece, but not much. It's really when you cannot pay on time, and that's where the money really flows. So the installment part basically build a lot of different product and to try to earn the real profit. And the card transaction tribe is more like the managing the real transaction, detection of fraud, anti-fraud, those kind of algorithms lives there. And the service is more like the billing part. And the operation was kind of other stuff, and the more was money using the points you earn from the card. You can buy different stuff. So that's kind of the 8 different areas we divide. So basically, each tribe will have their own channel part, which is app or web part, and also they're part of the kernel part. So the goal is really to divide IT so that each tribe can live by their own most of the time. They can have 85, till now, they can have more like 85% of their requirement done by this tribe without talking to other people. So we kind of bring the front end and the back end together into a group. So that helps a lot for lowering the dependency cost. And the other thing we do is that we merge the hated SA team and the BA team together. We kind of say, you know what, you guys do kind of the similar job, so now you have more in the same family now. Although when we do the interview, it's kind of a lot of strong feelings between each other. Like they don't do anything, and those people know nothing, something like that. But now you have the same family, and it's actually there's a lot of mix and match, but actually some people takes The BOT people kind of take over the 4 tribes, and SA people take over the other 4 tribes. But at least now they are the same, under the same title. Because the fintech, so we give them a good name. We call them technology product managers, and leave space for more like the finance product managers, so that then we can have a fintech with financial product manager and the technology product manager. So they quickly call themselves TPMs now, with a new brand name, with SA and BA together. So they like that. And also, we will talk the text. The testing part will come later, but basically now we have a end-to-end testing team, the channel testing team, and the kernel testing team together as a one team, also distributed to tribes. This is also a challenging part because we find out nobody tests end-to-end before, because a lot of the time I'm a channel testing team. I test the channel part with a monk for the kernel, and I'm the kernel testing team at Tungst with a marked channel, and I test my part, and then we hope we integrate. And that's really also sometimes bring why they need the UAT team, because those guys will really integrate and test. Okay, so that's kind of organization part. So this in the 6-month process, this kind of take us. Our first 3 months was kind of a pilot the tribe process with only one of them. This kind of a lot of other team were like work as usual. And then we piloting the processes and the other things we talk about. And after 6 months, we kind of hit the pedal one by one, and we kind of go into like the full mode with 8 tribes running together. After 3 months, we began this project. Okay, and just so when we choose the what we call the scaling agile model we use, it's interesting that we choose Spotify and Mackenzie choose Spotify as well. We feel that, but we also adopt a lot of the ESP terminologies and the thinkings in it. But we find out relatively Spotify model is, let's say, is the most easier one to be adopted. And you can more like, I just read the loads, something that people saying that, I don't like the Spotify model because it has to be culture or something like that. But I think compared with safe or less, basically Spotify limit you the least. So basically you adopt certain terms, and then you can define whatever you mean by Spotify model in a way. So it gives us a touch of change, and also that we can customize the process for the team. So that's why we choose the Spotify model together with a lot of ESP. You can see a lot of ESP thinkings behind. So that way we can mix and match things. Okay, so that's for the organization part and requirement hierarchy. So this is something I'm a Kanban guy, so I hate Scrum for sure, right? So a lot of ideology happen in the pure agile world. Something like you should have a user story, and then the user story should come from the requirement people, and then you can just size it, or you can just develop that. So that's more like the single layer requirement hierarchy. From my perspective, this never works in a big organization. It just never happens because just too complex, right? So there is something requirement user want, but then I have to decompose into several tribes, right? So you will never make it happen with one layer of a requirement hierarchy within a big organization. So you need to have at least 2 layers most of the time, and sometimes 3 layers, sometimes 4 layers. So so then you just have to pick the name. You can you can name it whatever you want, as long as there is a single terminology happening. And something from the business side, and then something down to the test level. So basically, you have to define how you decompose it, the requirement hierarchy. And that's a major effort we spend in the Ping An credit card, basically to train everybody to understand the terminology and also to understand how to break down things. That we kind of think breaking things down in the requirement is kind of key capability for if we call them agile coach or Kanban coach, whatever it is, but one of the very important key capabilities is helping people to break down the requirement into hierarchies. And happily, in here in Ping An credit card, we have only 2 layers, which is business requirement, come from the business side, and also the user story, which is to the tribe level. And then here we don't split, but in the tribe, as you may know that there is a squad within the tribe. So basically, we don't decompose in that scenario. Most of the time, we just assign the story to one of the tribes, one of the squad within the tribe to do the work. So that's why we have 2 levels. And even in some other Ping An companies, we may have 3 levels of requirement hierarchy before we break into tasks for developers. And if you count that level, you will have 4 levels of requirement hierarchy. So that's something is very big thing. We think you have to make it right and to align everybody into the big picture. Okay, and visualize the flow. So this is more like there's just too much requirement, and confidential, so I have to blur the picture. So basically, but give you a sense of feel that we kind of combine everything together so that we can see the 8 tribes, and we have a very long process for what's going on in each requirement, so we get a sense of feeling that okay, where we are, my requirement is. So give transparencies, and also you can see the dependencies between different tribes. So that's the other thing is really to ask people to use the tool. We find out it's also a very challenging task. Is that people I don't know whether it's China thing or not, but people just like to shooting emails or chart in WhatsApp or WeChat. It's just easier, right? Where is my requirement? Here's my requirement, and then I hope it's done, right? Something just happened, and something will make it happen for me. But then the other people lost in the track, and then this requirement never happened. So what we do is asking them, push them actually to use a lot of toolings. So that's another big part of the transformation. And gradually people understand the importance, and then they adopt after 2 or 3 months. Okay, and release and communication cadences. So before we introduce this change, basically there is a channel has their own release cycles, and kernel has their own release cycles, and a lot of times things didn't sync up with each other, and something just flew off the roof. And so we also spend a lot of energy trying to set up a same cadence for everybody. So it's a lot of color. So probably I have to explain more. So basically, we use more like the 2-week as the cadence. So everything was happen 2 weeks, because that's kind of the shortest cycle for the channel team. The channel team normally deliver in the 2 weeks cadence. So each month we will have 2 release windows. So that's what our base cadence is. And we find the other thing we find that a lot of time in this kind of fintech or maybe another complex scenarios, a lot of time you need iteration just to clarify the requirement. This is kind of one of the practices we find is very helpful. Although it may hurt anti-agile, but we think it works because if nobody really to refine the requirement in the good state, and then you just threw into developers, and then they will be hurting by the low flow efficiency because I have a problem, right? And then I have a problem, and business people come in the other day and ask them. He said, "Oh, interesting. I have to think about it." And then he go back and ask around, and your requirement just pending here, right? And then you have to work on another one. So that's promote parallel work, and also low flow efficiency. So a practice we find in this kind of scenario is that although it may reduce, it may increase the the time when you translate to each other. So basically, that's BA and SA people do is that they kind of becoming a translator for the requirement. So they kind of go to the business side and say, "Okay, tell me what do you want," and the business people will just use their imaginations to to magically give you a 2-word requirement or 1-sentence requirement, and then the BA people or SA people or now the TPM, they're the guys to really to begin to tell whether this flies or not. They will say, "You know what? This sounds ridiculous, and don't do that." But probably they put it in a nice way, right? And or they just say, "Oh, this is interesting. Maybe this works. Okay, whether we can do this way or that way." So they clarify the requirement. So this is the iteration when the TPM really works ahead of developers and try to make the requirement into a more final stage. And then we go into more like the dev and SIT, which means system integration testing. So then we have more like 2 weeks or 4 weeks to work on the requirement, depending on the complexity of the requirement. So that way we kind of parallel things a little bit, and normally we will have more like, as you can see, that we will have a 4-week, at least 4-week lead time, because 2 weeks spent in requirement clarification and 2 months spent in real developing, at least 4 weeks. And the other thing we have is that because the requirement was coming, most of the time when they come in, they will be allocated to one of the tribes by the customers, if they know, or they say, "I don't know," but the TPM will allocate for them. So there will be more like the allocation process. And then each requirement will go into one tribe, and the tribe will begin to plan what we do for our next release. So we will talk about replenishment meeting in a minute. There will be a process for selection, for the requirement selection. Then only the selected requirement will go into the planning meeting. So that's kind of the whole cadences. As you can see, that this also we spend a lot of time and try to help each team each tribe to adapt to these cadences and try to run these meetings effectively. I just talked to my colleague Michelle that sometimes we think it just should be just very easy to have a very effective meeting, but we find out it's very challenging most of the time. In a lot of organizations, there's a lot of just a lot of meetings happen for nothing and impact nothing. Okay, so next thing we do is that we establish some kind of operation review process together with the flow conditioning. So the other thing we do is that when we break into tribes, and a lot of time people tell us, they feel very scared. Oh, your IT people become too complex. 8 tribes, what do they mean? How do I find, the corresponding team? This should be very complex. So, but we have run this for 6 months now. It seems that because we carve the tribe along the business line, so it's almost 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 correspondence between the business side and the IT side. So it's actually ease the communication. And so that we can have, this happened actually in the 4th month or 5th month, almost in the end of our project, that we began to add this BU review meetings between the IT team as a whole to certain business unit. So that's part of the business team. So it may be a marketing team or it may be a sales team of the site. So basically, we will have 1 or 2 tribes just work for them, so that we bring these tribes, some of the key leaders, together with the business people to have a biweekly or monthly meeting. So in that meeting, basically what we do is just to go through the key requirement. We find out it's very interesting that in the business side, a lot of time requirement is invented by middle layer or even lower layer people, because they have to invent something, right? So, so a lot of time we experience that we have a list requirement that we cannot define. We cannot decide the priority because everybody say, this is the CEO requirement. This is the model requirement. You cannot change that. And then we say, what? We cannot decide, right? So we will bring to a meeting with the leader of that segment and say, okay, for the next release, we think we can hold 20 requirements, and then we got 40. So, and we do a little bit prioritization already, and so can you check for us? And a lot of times, surprisingly, the leader would say, what's that? I don't know. Who submitted that requirement? And the other guy would say, you know what? There was a meeting, I talked with you, remember? So I think it's very important for you. Okay, but this is more. So it's very clear that most of the time, so that's what David talked about, is that selection is a lot easier than prioritization, right? Because every single day, you go to a business people and say, what's the most important next? He will tell you, this is. Actually, he don't remember all he wants, right? So just too much. So it's hard to do a prioritization, but it's very easy for them to say, no, now I want this 3, make it happen. And if you think about that, every 2 weeks, you can have a business exec happily. I have my 3 happen. The other week, another 3. The other week, next. So then you won't have unhappy customers anymore, right? Because you already fulfill their need, every 2 weeks. So we kind of, although we have more like the CEO meeting every 2 weeks, but we insist that they set up this separate channel with each division leaders beside that 2 weeks meeting. Because in the CEO meeting, it's just too much big stuff, right? And then most of the time CEO talks. And the other department leaders, they will kind of, oh yeah, yeah. You talk, I don't talk, right? But if you have more like the business division meeting, and he would be the talking guy. And then he would be more willing to express his concerns, his worries, and then you have a more happy customer. So that's kind of things we pushed and work very well. Okay, and the other thing is the last thing in this project, actually, we didn't spend a lot of time in technology side. So this transformation, it's really about organization. We talk about KPIs later, organizations, KPIs, processes, way of working, without a lot of technology stuff. So the only little bit technology we do is that we call that build quality in. It's more like really the drive, the testing people working with the TPMs so that they can do spec by example. Basically, it's more like let everybody understand requirement and using the stories, using the examples to tell your requirement. So that's one key piece we use. And the other thing is that we just let the testers, let the developers to do some kind of smoke test beforehand. So, but normally, I'm here, so I call them tests because at least in China, the developers think more like testers, a second-class citizen. So it's humiliating for them if you just tell them, you are going to do some test. And so, what? I'm a developer, So we call them verification, whatever you tell them, right? So it's not a test. You just tell us what you have done is achieved. So showcase, whatever. You pick the name, but never call them test. And the last thing we do is that we gradually, it haven't finished, but it's already begun. We gradually merge the UAT team together with SIT team. So there's no UAT team anymore because we don't need somebody click the mouse but they not understand the real requirement. But we will still ask the business team to UAT for us. And we kind of invent some different ways to do that. It's app, so we can record the videos. And so we use that as a way of a quick feedback loop. And so that's something we do. And but we still need these steps, but not the whole team of people doing this thing without understanding what is that. Okay. So the last one, the matrix. And the good thing is that this project started last September and lasting through the year, the beginning of the year. So we have the time to influence the KPI settings. So basically, we talk with many people. As you can see, that we talk about this experience later in our slides, in our discussion in the business side. But a lot of time, they have a certain way of doing the KPI. But we help them to simplify to more like the 4 KPIs for the IT team. The lead time, but it's still average lead time because they just want to stick to that to feel better. And we hopefully we can change to 85% percentile next year because the number would be far more better this year. And we still use average lead time, the requirement lead time, defect lead time. So that's the only thing we tell you should care. And besides the quality metric, they already have some backed, weighted back model and also the available system time. Availability. So it's really the 4 KPIs. And with the all changes we introduced, as you can see that we consistently lower our lead time, both from the defect side and also from the requirement side to 48 days. Actually, this is what we promised the CEO when we first started the project. It's very simple, we find out. We kind of fail in a way that we didn't really lower the defect 50% because our promise before was more like, we will cut your lead time by 50%, and we will cut your defect by 50%. We achieved the first piece, and we kind of failed the second piece because they are already good enough on the quality side. So we think we cut the testing cost by 50%, but instead of the number of defects by 50%. So as you can see that this is really a very happy project for everybody. We are happy and the CEO is very happy you achieved your promises and cut the lead time. And in the end, so we closed this project just weeks ago, kind of. And we awarded a second contract for business transformation. So basically, we now begin to help the pure business team to do Agile. The marketing team, sales team, they kind of, how to do Agile. So they are kind of interested. So because of credit, we get the second contract to help the pure business side. And Michelle and I will talk more about the business agility stuff. This is more like IT folks, IT things, and we will talk about business agility practices we use in another customer called Zhong'an Insurance, and also it's kind of because the Ping An credit card already started, so we will talk about some of that practice as well tomorrow, 2 p.m. Okay, thank you. Questions?